Hey folks, I know I am just an old guy telling stories, but please leave a like and subscribe before we start. Let's enjoy in today's stories. Before I dive into today's stories, I want to say, disclaimer, the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. Ethan Parker was a man who had spent the last 3 years of his life doing everything he could to make his son happy. After losing his wife in a car accident, Ethan's world revolved around his 7-year-old son, Liam. The boy was quiet and withdrawn, but his one passion was toys, specifically vintage, collectible ones. For months, Liam had been begging for a rare toy called Laughing Tommy, an infamous 1950s-era doll with glassy eyes, a sailor suit, and a mechanical laugh that was said to sound unnervingly lifelike. Ethan had searched everywhere: eBay auctions, antique shops, even obscure toy forums, but the doll seemed impossible to find. Just as he was about to give up, a cryptic email appeared in his inbox. The sender, identified only as Collector 54, claimed to have Laughing Tommy in their possession. The message contained no price, only a request to meet in person. Ethan's unease grew when the meeting location turned out to be an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. The air was damp and cold, and the distant sound of dripping water echoed through the empty halls. The seller, a gaunt man with hollow eyes and fingers that trembled as he handed over the package, muttered, "This is what you're looking for. But remember, you'll pay the price when the laughter stops." Ethan dismissed the warning as eccentricity, paid the man in cash, and took the doll home. Seeing Liam's face light up when he unwrapped Laughing Tommy made it all worthwhile. Or so Ethan thought. For the first few days, everything seemed fine. Liam adored Laughing Tommy. He carried the doll everywhere and even slept with it at night. The doll's laugh, a scratchy, mechanical sound, echoed through the house as Liam pressed its button repeatedly. But soon, the laughter began to wear on Ethan. It activated on its own at odd hours, echoing in the dead of night. Worse, he started hearing it in places where the doll wasn't. In the shower, in the basement, even in his car. Once, while brushing his teeth, he swore he saw the doll's reflection in the bathroom mirror, even though it was upstairs in Liam's room. Things took a darker turn when Ethan found Liam whispering to the doll. When asked what he was doing, Liam replied matter-of-factly, "Tommy's telling me secrets." "What kind of secrets?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. "About Mommy, about you, about the accident." Ethan's blood ran cold. There was no way Liam could know the details of his mother's death, unless someone or something was telling him. That night, Ethan awoke to the sound of faint laughter. He crept to Liam's room, only to find the doll sitting upright on the bed, its glassy eyes fixed on the door. Liam was fast asleep, but the doll's head turned slightly, as if watching Ethan. Ethan's unease turned to outright fear when he began to notice other strange occurrences. Objects moved on their own. Doors opened and closed without explanation. At night, the house was filled with faint whispers that seemed to come from every shadowed corner. One evening, Ethan decided to test the doll. He locked it in a trunk and left it in the garage. But when he returned to Liam's room, the doll was there, sitting on the dresser, its sailor hat askew. The laugh it let out was longer, deeper, and more distorted than before. The next night, Ethan heard heavy footsteps in the hall. Grabbing a baseball bat, he opened his bedroom door to find Liam standing there, holding laughing Tommy. "He says you're scared of him," Liam said, his voice eerily calm. "You shouldn't be. He just wants to play." Desperate, Ethan tried to take the doll away, but Liam screamed and clawed at his father until Ethan relented. Later, Ethan attempted to destroy the doll. He tried setting it on fire, but the flames refused to catch. He smashed it with a hammer, only to find it intact minutes later, back in Liam's hands. The doll's laugh seemed to mock him. In his desperation, Ethan tracked down the seller, who reluctantly explained the truth. Laughing Tommy was no ordinary doll. It was created by a deranged toy maker who infused it with dark magic to trap a vengeful spirit. The doll fed on the emotional bond it formed with its owner, growing stronger with each passing day. Once it reached full strength, it would consume the child's soul. "There's only one way to stop it," the seller said. "A ritual, but it requires a willing sacrifice." Ethan returned home to find Liam's condition worsening. The boy's eyes were sunken, his skin pale, and he laughed uncontrollably, the sound blending with the doll's mechanical cackle. Shadows moved unnaturally in the house, and the air was thick with an oppressive presence. With time running out, Ethan prepared for the ritual. The instructions were horrifying but clear. Ethan would have to offer his own soul to break the curse. In an emotional farewell, he hugged Liam tightly, whispering, "I love you more than anything. Never forget that." As the ritual commenced, the doll fought back. The house shook violently, walls cracking as dark shapes darted through the corners of Ethan's vision. Objects flew through the air, and a deafening roar filled the room. Ethan pushed through the chaos, chanting the incantation until the final words left his lips. The doll let out a blood-curdling laugh before crumbling into ash. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and Liam collapsed, unconscious but alive. Ethan, however, was gone. When Liam woke up, the house was silent. He called for his father but received no answer. All that remained of Laughing Tommy were fragments of wood and cloth scattered across the living room floor. For weeks, Liam struggled to adjust, often crying himself to sleep. Yet in time, he grew to understand the depth of his father's sacrifice. He kept a piece of the doll's shattered face as a reminder of the love that had saved him. Years later, Liam grew up to tell the story of his father's sacrifice, warning others about the dangers of obsession and unchecked desires. He became a quiet but strong man, carrying his father's love as his guiding light. In the story's final moments, Liam walks past an old toy store. In the window, he sees a familiar sailor-suited doll, its glassy eyes staring back at him. As he turns away, he hears a faint, scratchy laugh echo behind him, sending chills down his spine. Liam froze in his tracks, heart pounding as the laugh echoed faintly through the empty street. He turned back to the toy store, but the doll was no longer in the window. The shop's interior was dark, the closed sign swinging slightly as if moved by an unseen hand. Unable to shake the eerie feeling, Liam hurried home, clutching his coat tightly. That night, he dreamt of his father, Ethan, standing in a foggy void, holding the shattered piece of Laughing Tommy. His father's voice echoed in the dream. "It's not over, son. You have to finish what I started." The next morning, Liam found the piece of the doll's face he had kept as a memento glowing faintly on his dresser. It felt warm to the touch, and a faint vibration coursed through it. Suddenly, the laughter returned, louder and more menacing than before, reverberating through the walls of his apartment. Liam's TV flickered on its own, displaying static before words appeared, spelled out letter by letter, "Come back." His phone buzzed uncontrollably, notifications filled with strings of laughter and cryptic messages that he couldn't trace. The oppressive presence he remembered from childhood was back, stronger than ever. Desperate for answers, Liam revisited the toy store. This time, it was open, though the inside was shrouded in darkness despite the daylight. Rows of old, dusty toys lined the shelves, their lifeless eyes seemingly following his every movement. An elderly shopkeeper emerged from the shadows, her voice cracked and low. "You've seen it, haven't you? The curse doesn't end with a sacrifice. It demands more." The shopkeeper revealed that Laughing Tommy was part of a series of cursed dolls, each bound to a different spirit. To break the curse completely, Liam would have to gather the remnants of the other dolls and destroy them together. A task that would take him deep into the world of the occult. The first clue led him to an abandoned orphanage, where another doll, Weeping Wendy, was said to reside. The orphanage was a crumbling ruin, its walls covered in graffiti, and its halls filled with the sound of phantom children crying. Liam entered cautiously, flashlight in hand. Shadows moved just beyond the edge of the light, and the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. In a dusty playroom, he found Weeping Wendy, her porcelain face cracked, and her eyes filled with painted tears. The moment he touched the doll, the crying intensified, echoing in his ears as spectral figures of children appeared around him. Their hollow eyes stared accusingly, their voices chanting, "You can't save him!" Liam barely escaped with the doll, the ghostly figures chasing him through the halls, their cries turning to shrieks. Outside, he collapsed on the ground, clutching Weeping Wendy as her mechanical sobs faded into silence. But he knew this was only the beginning. Days passed, and Liam found himself unable to escape the growing effects of the curse. The dolls seemed to weigh on his mind and body, dragging him into an abyss of despair. Sleep became a battleground as nightmares plagued him nightly. In his dreams, he saw himself standing in a burning field, the dolls surrounding him, their laughter and cries blending into a maddening cacophony. Liam's health deteriorated rapidly. His skin grew pallid, his eyes bloodshot and sunken, and deep shadows etched themselves into his face. The smallest movements left him breathless, and every step felt as though he carried an unbearable weight. The dolls whispered to him constantly, filling his ears with threats, secrets, and promises of pain. One evening, Liam glanced in the mirror and recoiled in horror. His reflection moved independently of him, grinning wickedly as it mouthed silent words. The room seemed to spin, the walls narrowing around him as a deep, guttural laugh echoed behind him. He turned sharply, but no one was there. Just the dolls, sitting lifelessly on his desk. The voices began to follow him outside. On the streets, in the grocery store, even at work, Liam heard faint whispers, calling his name, laughing softly, or crying bitterly. Paranoia consumed him, and he began avoiding people, fearing they too were watching him, judging him for the curse he carried. Unable to bear the strain, Liam sought the shopkeeper again. She looked at him with pity, her voice heavy with regret. "The curse is feeding on you now. It knows your fear, your pain. You have to act quickly, or it will claim you before you can finish." She handed him an ancient journal bound in cracked leather. Inside were the instructions for a forbidden ritual, a way to confront the spirits bound to the dolls directly. "But be warned," she whispered. "This ritual requires you to face your worst fears. If you falter, it will consume you completely." As Liam read the journal, his hands trembled. The ritual demanded he gather all the dolls, place them in a circle, and invoke the spirits at midnight under a new moon. "Once they appear," the journal warned, "they will test your resolve. The spirits thrive on your doubts, your guilt, your weakness. You must stand firm, or they will claim your soul." As the new moon approached, Liam prepared for the ritual. He gathered Weeping Wendy, the fragment of Laughing Tommy, and began the search for the other dolls. Each one came with its own horrifying encounter, testing Liam's strength and sanity. By the night of the new moon, he had 4 dolls, each radiating an oppressive energy that seemed to darken the very room they were in. Liam set up the ritual in an abandoned church at the edge of town, a place the shopkeeper had told him was neutral ground. The room was cold and damp, the air thick with the weight of unseen eyes. In the center of the church, Liam arranged the dolls in a circle, their painted faces staring blankly ahead. As midnight struck, Liam lit the black candles prescribed in the journal and began the incantation. The air grew heavier with each word, the shadows around him thickening and twisting into grotesque shapes. Suddenly, the dolls' eyes began to glow, one by one, their laughter and cries filling the room in a deafening chorus. The spirits appeared, their forms shifting and indistinct, their voices a cacophony of anger and despair. "Why do you defy us?" they roared. "You cannot undo what has been done." Liam's voice wavered as he continued the incantation. The spirits pressed closer, their icy presence sapping his strength. They whispered his deepest fears, dredging up memories of his father's sacrifice, his mother's death, and his own guilt for ever bringing Laughing Tommy into their lives. "You failed him," one spirit hissed, its form towering over him. "You will fail again." Liam clenched his fists, tears streaming down his face. "No," he said, his voice growing steadier. "I won't." The final words of the incantation rang out, and the candles flared, their light searing through the darkness. The spirits screamed as their forms dissolved, their energy drawn into the circle. The dolls shattered one by one, their fragments burning with an unholy fire. When the last doll crumbled to ash, the oppressive weight lifted. The room was silent, save for Liam's ragged breathing. He collapsed to the floor, the remnants of the curse smoldering in the circle before him. Liam emerged from the church as dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight cutting through the lingering darkness. He carried with him the ashes of the dolls, determined to scatter them in the farthest corners of the earth, ensuring the curse could never reform. But as he walked away, a faint laugh echoed behind him, a reminder that some darknesses are never truly vanquished. Weeks after the ritual, Liam found himself haunted by questions. The dolls were destroyed, the oppressive weight lifted, but the faint laughter he heard that day still echoed in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something vital, something about the curse's origin that would explain why it lingered. Liam decided to retrace the curse's history, starting with the name that had been whispered by the shopkeeper, Victor Halloway. Hours of research led him to a forgotten chapter in local history. Victor Halloway had been a toy maker in the 1920s, celebrated for his lifelike creations. But whispers of strange occurrences surrounded his work. Children falling ill, families reporting unexplained tragedies after purchasing his toys. According to old newspapers, Halloway's workshop had burned down under mysterious circumstances. The tragedy killed Victor and several workers, but rumors suggested the fire was no accident. Some claimed Victor had been dabbling in dark rituals, binding souls to his creations in a desperate attempt to achieve immortality. The articles led Liam to the remains of the workshop, now an overgrown lot at the edge of town. The once bustling factory was a skeleton of charred wood and rusted machinery. As Liam stepped through the broken gates, the air seemed to grow colder. Shadows danced unnaturally in the corners of his vision, and faint whispers carried on the wind. Inside the ruins, Liam found remnants of Victor's work. Half-melted dolls with glassy eyes, charred blueprints, and tools twisted by the fire's heat. On a scorched workbench, he uncovered a leather-bound journal. The cover was marked with strange symbols that seemed to shift when he looked at them. Liam hesitated before opening it, his heart pounding. The pages were filled with Victor's meticulous notes, designs for his toys intertwined with incantations written in an unfamiliar language. As Liam flipped through the pages, a sense of dread grew. Victor's obsession with immortality was clear. He believed he could capture the essence of a soul and bind it to his creations, giving them eternal life at the cost of their humanity. One entry chilled Liam to the core. The children's laughter sustains them. Their joy feeds the bond, while their despair strengthens it. The stronger the bond, the harder it is to break. Only by binding the fragments together can the circle be completed. The journal also contained a list of names, children who had owned Victor's dolls. Most of the names were followed by a single word, taken. Among the names, Liam found one that stopped him cold, Liam Parker. His own name was written in shaky, fading ink, with the date of his childhood marked beside it. The implication was clear. He had been targeted long before Ethan brought Laughing Tommy into their lives. As Liam stood frozen, the journal's pages began to flutter violently, as if caught in an invisible wind. A shadowy figure coalesced before him, a twisted, spectral version of Victor Halloway. His voice was a guttural whisper, filled with malice. "You should not have come here." Liam stumbled back as the figure advanced, the room around him warping into a nightmarish vision of the past. He saw Victor's workshop alive again, filled with children's laughter that quickly turned to screams. The toy maker's ghost loomed over him, his face twisted in a grotesque grin. "You carry the final fragment," Victor hissed. "You cannot escape your place in the circle." Liam clutched the journal as Victor's spirit attacked, the shadows around him forming clawed hands that reached for his throat. He remembered the incantations he had used during the ritual and began chanting, his voice trembling but resolute. The symbols on the journal's cover began to glow, and the spectral hands recoiled. Victor let out a furious roar, his form flickering as the workshop dissolved into chaos. "You cannot undo what has been done," he bellowed. "Your soul is mine." Liam focused all his strength on the chant, the glowing symbols growing brighter until they filled the room with blinding light. Victor's form writhed and disintegrated, his screams echoing into silence as the vision faded. Liam collapsed to the ground, the journal falling open beside him. Its pages were now blank, the symbols burned away. Emerging from the ruins, Liam felt a strange calm settle over him. He knew the curse was finally broken. Not just for him, but for all the souls Victor had trapped. He returned to the shopkeeper, who greeted him with a knowing smile. "You've done it," she said. "The circle is complete. The darkness can no longer spread." Liam handed her the now empty journal. "What happens to this?" The shopkeeper's expression darkened. "It must be hidden, where no one can find it again. Temptation is a dangerous thing." As Liam left the shop for the final time, he felt the weight of his father's sacrifice lift. The echoes of laughter no longer haunted him. Yet, as he walked away, he couldn't help but glance back, half expecting to see Victor's shadow in the window. All he saw was his own reflection, smiling faintly in the sunlight. A reminder that some victories come at a cost, but they are victories nonetheless.